today we're going to talk about medical writing, which was kind of my launch pad, my professional launch pad after the PhD. And it's been now, 13 years that I started that that adventure. And yeah, I'd really love to hear about what's going on from your point of view, and to share for people, because I know people are still super interested in this domain, to share what is out there, what are the opportunities, what are the caveats, etc. So looking forward to having this conversation.
Me too, David. Yeah, it's one of those obscure fields, eh? So excited to share what I know about the field.
Excellent. All right. And also, Rebecca, you told me this is your first time on a podcast.
Mm.
And I just want to tell you, it's a live recording, but it's for a podcast. So there's no mistakes. If we need to repeat anything, it's fine. And there's no stress
Okay.
required.
Okay.
All
I'll
right.
try to relax.
Excellent. And now a mental note to myself. I just updated the name of the podcast to Beyond the Thesis with Papa PhD. So I need to remember
Mm,
to say welcome to, etc., and not just say Papa PhD like before. Okay, so
mm.
I'm going to pause, and then we're going to start.
For sure.
Welcome to this new episode of Beyond the Thesis with Papa PhD. Today, I have the great pleasure of having, straight from Cape Town, South Africa, with me, Dr. Rebecca Tadokera. Rebecca is a medical communications professional who has made a successful transition to the field after spending more than 12 years working as a research scientist in academia. She holds a PhD in clinical immunology and a Master of Public Health from the University of Cape Town, and has worked as a senior research scientist and research specialist in a number of academic and public health institutions in South Africa. Rebecca is the founder and CEO of Sci Health Communications, a boutique medical writing and scientific communication consulting company based in Cape Town, South Africa. And she is passionate about science communication and its potential to positively impact society. She's equally dedicated to mentoring the next generation of scientists, helping them align their careers with their values and passions. And actually, that's how I got to meet Rebecca in one of the live sessions that she holds, trying to help people navigate their way into this domain. Um, when Rebecca's not working, you can find her enjoying the great outdoors and soaking up nature's beauty. She's also an avid runner, regularly competing half marathons. It's a great pleasure to have you here today. Welcome to Beyond the Thesis with Papa PhD, Rebecca.
Thanks for having me, David. It's a real honor to be here this afternoon. And yeah, I'm really excited to share with your audience what experience I have and yeah, and learn from each other.
Excellent. So, see here we have Sylvie who is saying sound and video are good. So we can go on with the this live recording and this interview. Um, Rebecca, and this is actually it's also an opportunity for me to kind of meet you in more,
Mm,
on a one-on-one, because again
right.
I took part in it was on LinkedIn, right, in those LinkedIn
Yes.
spaces. I don't know what the name they give to those audio
LinkedIn
huddle,
audio.
LinkedIn audio spaces,
Yeah,
but
LinkedIn audio.
so I'm super happy for that part of being able to have you for like almost an hour, just to be able to get to know you and to also ask you my questions. But also because we're talking about something that I've been doing now for, like I said, 13-ish years,
Mm,
and which was the first like full-time job that I got after my PhD, so medical
right,
writing.
right,
And
right.
yeah, so before we go on and start digging into what the landscape of medical writing jobs looks like today, I'd like you to maybe add one or two more, elements to the presentation I did of who you are, so that people can get to know you just a little bit better. What makes you tick,
Yeah.
what motivates you,
Mhm.
and what brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. So yeah, I guess you gave good intro, a good overview of my background. But I guess one fun fact is I'm actually originally from Zimbabwe. Yeah, so I moved to Cape Town in way back in 2008 when I came to do my PhD at the University of Cape Town.
Hmm.
So since then I've been resident in Cape Town. So yeah, so I share that I'm pretty much a citizen of both countries now, South Africa and Zimbabwe. So yeah, I think that's one thing that a lot of people don't know about me,
A
and I
question:
enjoy the yeah.
Did you move for research?
I moved actually to do my PhD at the University of Cape Town.
Okay, there
And
you go.
then it just became quite difficult for the family to be moving back and forth, back and forth. I mean, Zimbabwe and South Africa are quite close, but the travel logistics is still quite
Of
complicated.
course.
You sometimes have to do two or three planes to connect. So it just
Hmm.
became really complicated. And so eventually, my husband and I just decided to move the family down to Cape Town.
Hmm.
And it's really just become home, really.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for like so many of us who do PhDs. So there's, we know that universities have a huge percentage of graduate students who come from abroad, for the reason that, first, it's enriching to their journey, but also I
Yes.
think it's part of the model to attract
Co-
talent
Correct.
and brains
Correct.
from
Mm.
abroad. Yeah.
Yep.
and
And I think
and
it's one of the metrics actually that international rankings, having international
oh yeah,
students is quite a prestigious thing.
of course. And you were going to say something more about yourself. I
I
felt
guess you
that you
also.
were. Yeah.
I was going to say to add to the nature part where you mentioned about how I love the outdoors, and Cape Town is such a beautiful city. I enjoy running much better.
Mhm.
It's much better than going to the gym because the scenery is just awesome. And you told me you have not been to Cape Town yet, so maybe you should just push it up a little bit higher on
Mhm.
your priority list. It's definitely would be worth.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a lovely place. So yeah.
I'll put it on my list definitely, and yeah. So the thing that I think, where I want to go next, of course, the reason why I wanted to have you on the show was that I saw how much energy you were putting in just trying to explain the space and kind of lay
Right.
out the land of what medical writing is to people who are just finishing their degree, or just wanting to transition. And that I felt that energy of wanting uh to give back to the new
Right.
generation, and I thought, it would be great to have you here to kind of do the same for the Papa PhD, Beyond the Thesis audience. And it all starts for me always, uh, in the chapter of your story. How,
Right.
you had your academic journey, then you had your professional research journey. When
Mm.
was it that you first started to think about switching to non-research activity, and when was it that you discovered this domain, this industry, which is medical writing?
Right. Interesting that you should ask, because I was reflecting as I was part of my preparation, and I was reflecting and I realized that um, actually, for me, I think the inkling to move out of academia started very early on, soon after my PhD. And one of the stories that I always tell is I kept searching on the internet. What else can I do with the PhD in clinical immunology? So
Mhm.
I spent hours on the internet and I couldn't find anything. I think now the space is a lot more information than way back then in 2011 when I graduated. So it took me a while to figure out. In fact, it took me an extra degree because after my PhD, then I was like, okay, I think I want to do something that has a little bit more of an impact on the public.
Mhm.
And what do I do now? And all of the information says public health. So I went and I did
Okay.
another master's in public health, thinking that okay, this is going to be my ticket out. Uh, I'd say that it was a fun degree to do. I enjoyed it, uh, but it didn't really take me to where I wanted to, because then I went into public health research, which was not. I still didn't feel quite fulfilled. So I
Mhm.
stayed in academic research for a few more years. I would say it actually took COVID for me to change direction,
Okay.
because it was then during the COVID pandemic. I think it was just a more of a melting pot, because the TB research that was my focus area kind of took a knock when it came to the funding. So there was really not much I could do with my research fellowship coming to an end, and no funding for it. And at the same time, they each kept on, I guess, of wanting to communicate science and impact
Mhm.
society. And I started actually just very informally blogging on more on Instagram then, or in Facebook, just sharing information about,
Okay.
because it just bothered me a lot, the amount of misinformation that was going on around during the COVID time. And so that's basically how I started, and I stumbled into the field. Uh, and back then, I didn't even know that what I was doing was medical writing. I was just disseminating information the best way I knew. So then eventually I figured out, okay, actually, this is a career path. There's people who do this kind of thing for professionally. So I think that was my first contact with medical writing.
Mhm. And then, when was your when was your first contact with people who actually did it professionally, and with people who hired you as a medical writer? What was the oh, and also this blogging was while you were doing this research that I mentioned, right? You were doing this on the side.
Yes, yes, it was on the side. It was on the side, right? So, yeah, back to your question. You said, what was my first contact now with people who do medical writing? So after I'd found out that this was a potential path that I could actually pursue, uh, LinkedIn, I think LinkedIn had to do with it. It had a lot to do with it, because then I actually went online and I started searching and looking for potential roles that hire, and potential companies actually. David, are you
Yes,
there?
I'm here. I'm just listening to
Okay,
you.
yeah, all right. Yeah, so I went online trying to find companies that hired medical writers. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of companies that hire medical writers here in South Africa. So, and the field is still actually quite new. It's still quite in its infancy. That's the right word, right?
Hmm.
It's in infancy. So there's just a handful of companies that actually hire medical writers. So eventually, how I got into my first role was through an ex-colleague. We had been working together at Stellenbosch University, and she
Okay.
was a postdoc. She was a postdoc, and then somebody referred me and told me, "Oh, she's actually doing medical writing." And
Hmm.
that was when I I
As a
contacted
postdoc,
her, and I was,
so
no,
she
no, no.
was
She
doing
had
it.
finished. So
Oh,
she had finished. Yeah, no, she quit her postdoc basically and took on an associate medical writing role. So then when I found out, then I got in contact with this colleague and I asked, and she said, "Oh yes, our company is growing and is actually hiring new medical writers. Would you like me to refer you?" And so that's how I got hired for my very first medical writing role. It was actually a referral. So I think that just speaks to the power of just building your network and connections, because in medical writing, like I said earlier on, it's a very obscure field.
yes.
So you might not just find opportunities online or on Indeed or something. Most of the times it's through referrals.
And for me, it was the same. It was through a referral that I got my first position, which then,
Right.
led to like almost 5 years in the same company, to
Right, right.
becoming a
And
senior
did you
medical
know
writer.
about medical writing
I did
before
not.
you?
I did not. I had to learn about it while talking with these people who had done their masters, their degrees in the same institute as I had, and I was just asking them how, what this was about and how they got there, and then one of them said, "Well, if you're interested, let's work on your CV, tailor it, and then I'll pass it on."
Right,
And
right.
so, this was the switch to a full time job as a medical writer.
this was a switch to that was the first switch to a medical writing, to a corporate job out of academia.
Hmm.
And I
And but
guess
I'm asking because I always like to kind of understand and share what was the reflection, and what were the conversations going on, um, well, and also, within your own self, but with other people, about leaving academia. What was the attraction of going into the corporate domain, or what was it that wasn't working for you in academia?
yeah, no, excellent point. So the conversations, I think there was a lot of conversations going on, especially inside my head, uh, because as we all know, I mean, once we've done a PhD, the default thinking is that you should be a professor, and we all strive for that, for a spot in the ivory tower, right?
Yep.
But I think the ivory tower can only accommodate so much, and there's only so much funding. And
Hmm.
I'll go back to the point of limited research funding, and that is a real issue because most of the jobs in
Still today,
academia
yeah.
are soft funded. A lot of contracts are soft funded, and if that soft funding comes to an end, there's nothing much you can do. I mean, you could work for free if you really want to, but yeah, who wants to, right?
It's not
And there's
sustainable.
only it's not sustainable, and there's only so many professorships really that can be had. I mean, universities are not on an ongoing expansion, so
Hmm.
I think that is one of the big limitations with the academic environment. Even for people who want to stay in academia, sometimes I think the environment doesn't always, it can't accommodate everybody who wants to be
No.
there. So with that, I guess, comes the thinking that, oh, maybe I failed, maybe I've done something wrong. And I actually went through, I would say, a mourning phase, like really just feeling very despondent that, oh, I didn't make it. I didn't manage to hang on. So maybe I failed, And I think that is something that a lot of PhDs go through. I don't know about yourself or any of the other people you've spoken to,
I've been
but
there.
that was a real, yeah. So that was big.
Yes. No, and it's really, I think it's very common and very, how can I say, prevalent experience for PhDs. And there's a whole. I just came out of a series of seminars here in Montreal this Wednesday, and it's a culture that's been there for a long time and that's still
Mm,
there. That, although we all know the statistics are now out and confirmed that, depending on the domain, 15-20% of people have a place as a professor, as a tenure track professor after
mm,
their degree, not more. Then, if you count people who stay in university in other jobs, in other positions, it can go up to 40-ish,
mm,
50-ish in humanities. But then there's this other 50-60% of people, or 80 if you just consider tenure track, that need to find to carve their path in a different space. And
right.
although there's, universities are trying, or their efforts to create some tools, some to add some training to the curriculum for career readiness, it's a big chunk of people who finish and see and find out that, first, maybe they found out that they don't want to become professors, but also they
Mm,
find out that it's really difficult to
yeah.
access those jobs. They have this sense of failure and this sense of
Yes.
mourning, like you said. And
Mhm,
it is it's natural now, because the rhetoric and the way they sell you a PhD degree is, how can I say, it's not transparent as to what
mm,
your professional outcomes can be. At least not from the outset. Eventually, you get to the middle of your PhD or final years, and then there are workshops presented. But I think, for
right.
me, I think it's too late. I think you should have
It
those
should be
that knowledge from day one. That I
100%
went through the same, and it is
I
difficult.
complete. No, I completely agree with you. And I'd say that maybe probably Canada, Europe, US, or the more high income or developed world, maybe there's more of those workshops. But here in South Africa, and maybe even in most of the universities in Africa, I think there's that huge gap really of PhDs not knowing what. Like,
Mm,
remember, I spoke about what else can I do with my PhD, and that is because that information is just not there, and you are just left to your own devices as a student to figure
mhm.
out what else must you be doing, and try to find that, carve out that path for yourself. So I think the career readiness aspect, I think it's still lacking quite a bit. So
Yeah,
there's more work to be done there.
yeah. Well, that's what we're doing here today. Let's get people ready.
Excellent.
Let's
Yep,
get people to
yep,
know.
yes, exactly. What else is out there? What else is out there? Exactly.
Exactly. And for me, that's why I started the podcast. I think there's nothing better. There's you can create a I don't know, a workbook, a PDF, something that kind of talks about it, but there's nothing better than someone sharing their story. And that's why I started Papa
Ex-
PhD and now Beyond the
exactly.
Thesis.
Mm,
So
mm,
I think we've covered that part of how you kind of discovered medical writing, how and why also you wanted to transition. But now, what getting to the meat of it, what is the landscape looking like today? So when I was in that first company, and here I'm in Montreal, so the company was actually working almost exclusively with American pharma clients. But
mm,
in your experience, um, what does the landscape look like? Um, you know, how easy, how easy
mm.
can people expect it to be to access and to get to their first job as a medical writer once they have finished their PhD, finished their masters, or their, I don't know, X year of postdoc? How are things looking like today in on that side of things?
Yeah, it's the way I would describe it, David. I would say it's more of a mixed bag.
Hmm.
And I'll explain a little bit more about what I mean, what I mean with that. So, in a way, I think the life sciences industry is on the boom right now, and that speaks to pharma, to research, vaccines. I mean, you name it. There's a
Hmm.
lot of growth globally on a global scale in that space, and so that means more opportunities for people who want to go into medical communications, work in pharma, and that sort of thing. And we have seen that expansion. I told you earlier on that in South Africa, medical communications is quite new. And we have seen quite a few companies actually trying to aggressively recruit and build their businesses in this part of the world. And that is because the business is there. You can't hire more people if you don't have the business, right?
Hmm.
So I think that speaks to growth in the industry. But then also, this is also one of those topical issues. There's AI coming on, and we don't know how that is going to impact the industry. Really, I mean,
Hmm.
everybody's just just watching and trying to learn and see how this new technology is going to impact that side, that
Hmm.
field, because some of the tasks really actually are automatable. You can automate some of the stuff, but not everything. But it's AI is not going to replace human medical writers, for obvious reasons.
Hmm.
So for that reason, I would say that the landscape right now, for me, it feels like a mixed bag. It's growing, but at the same time, there's also this caution. Even with companies, I think even with their hiring, they're probably cautious about that as well.
Hmm.
So that's what I would say. I can go. I don't know if you have any comment on
Well,
that before I mention the next point.
my first comment is AI is going to, for certain, be part of some of the tools we use, but companies, like especially pharma companies, they're so mm, they have so many legal imperatives. I remember the process in that company that I worked was quite complex, of medical regulation reviews, etc.
Mhm.
That
Right.
I feel that to a certain extent, that precludes us from being menaced by AI.
Right.
To a certain extent, I think
Mm,
tools with AI are going to be used for sure, but the
right.
writing, the researching, the referencing,
Right.
um, it'll take human. I know. I hope my hope and my feeling is that it takes a human to do it well, and then to
Right.
get it approved through medreg. That's
Correct.
my feeling. But
Yeah.
one thing that I can share, and that I think, I'd like you to maybe dig into a little bit more. I can share that that company that I worked in, it's here, based here in Montreal. It's called IC Axon, and they were actively recruiting young graduates, and then they had this whole onboarding process. So
Mm,
I was, I think, quite lucky to fall into that organization, because they tested you, as you know is the standard. You have those writing tests, but they were ready to train you also, to really
right.
onboard you and give you continued training,
Mm,
knowing that you had no training in writing, that you were going to have to change your style, from the academic style of writing, etc. um, what is a and where I'm going with this is, what is a path, for a fresh graduate, into a position, let's say, equivalent to yours? I imagine that there's an entry path to then becoming
right.
a senior medical writer, and then, growing your career within the space. What's the
Yeah.
entry path?
The entry path, right. So I'll talk about my experience, because that's the experience I
Hmm.
know the most. So I think for most of these medical communications companies, I think the entry uh, requirement is more or less the same. For most of the times, they will recruit you and hire you at an associate medical writer level, and that I think is an ideal position, especially for somebody who, as well, most of the times they will want a PhD graduate or maybe a postdoc.
Hmm.
But I don't think a PhD is in essential. I think a recent graduate, a PhD or the master's graduate or even a BSc uh, would pretty much fit that entry criteria, in my opinion, because it's pretty much like a trainee kind of
Hmm.
opportunity.
Oh yeah.
But for somebody like me, I was coming in from academia with all these years of academic experience. I feel like, in fact, I took a pay cut to get into medical writing.
Hmm.
I've spoken to some people who say that it's a little bit unusual. I think in some countries they would try to match, but for me, I actually took, because I was coming in and coming from academia. I had already established and got into a position where I was going to be a PI,
Hmm.
and then coming back to an associate medical writer role was kind of like a few steps back, because it's kind of like a trainee position. So my advice then, for somebody who is coming in from a more senior academic role, I think that somebody should be prepared. You should be prepared to make that sacrifice. And for me, the thinking then, as I took that pay cut, was this was in a field that was growing, where I had potential to grow as much as I wanted within the company, or if I decided to move fields. But I stayed for 8 months before
Okay.
I actually stepped out, and I decided I I wanted more independence, and I decided to work as a freelancer really.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah.
Excellent. And so this what this is telling me is, uh, you need to understand that although you have this degree, very specialized,
Yep.
the top of the academic degrees that you can get, the
Mm,
PhD, or even the masters, of course. But although you come with all these years of studies, when you go into another space, when you go into industry, be it medical writing or something else, you will have to learn the ropes. You will have to learn the
yep.
language. You will have to learn, the way that things are done. You will have to learn, the way that things are, managed. You will have to learn, the way that things are, managed. You will have to learn, the way that things are, managed. You will have to learn, the way that things are, managed. You will have to learn, the way that things are, managed. You will have to learn, the way that things are, managed. You will have to learn, the way that things are, managed. You will have to learn, the way that things are, managed. You will have to learn, the way that things are, managed. You will have to learn, the way that things are, managed. You will have to learn, the way that things are, managed. You will have to learn, the way that things are, managed. You will have to learn, the way that things are, managed. You will have to learn, the way that things are, managed. You will have to learn, the way that things are, managed. You will have to learn, the way that things are, managed. You will have to learn, the way that things are, managed. You will have to learn, the way that things are done. In our
Mm.
case, in medical writing, you will have to relearn how to write.
Right.
And
Correct.
and it's you need to be ready to, for a little while, maybe accept less uh, income. Let's talk about it that way than you had
Yep.
predicted beforehand.
Right.
But then,
Mm.
but then also it means that you evolve faster uh,
You do.
later on, right?
Yeah, yep. True. And I think that's one of the reasons why they want to take somebody who's got a PhD or a postdoc, uh, given an option, because they know that that person will be able to learn quickly, and you will catch up. Most of the times, for people who have stayed in industry, I've heard a lot of people say that, oh, you actually just you quickly catch up with
Hmm.
regards to the salary. But yeah, you're right. You are spot on in saying that you're not going to just copy and paste your experience and maybe your seniority level from academia to medical writing. I mean, I've heard some coaches, because I coach people on this on the side as well. I've heard people who say, "Oh, I'm trying to apply for senior medical writing roles, and because I've published this and that paper," and I was like, "That's not how
Not
it
how it
works."
works. You can become senior quickly in 6 months, a year. You can, but
Yeah,
you need to prove yourself
you need to
within the
show.
organization. Yeah,
Exactly.
because it is a very different exercise of communication, of writing, etc.
It's very different. It's regulated. It's systematic. I mean, you spoke about the regulation. It's quite different. I mean, you don't just write an abstract and submit to a conference like we do in academia. The system is very regulated and controlled, and so yeah, it's different.
And so you're talking about the people you coach, and can you share what the questions are they come with you, or what maybe let's start with that. What questions people who come to you for your help in getting into the space? What are the questions, the main questions that they ask you? One or two.
Yep, yep. One main question that a lot of people ask is, do I need another degree? And I think this is a recurring theme, because when you've been trained to be an academic, for some reason we think that everything we do you need to have a degree for it.
Hmm.
And and I shared earlier my experience of having to going back to do, not I didn't have to, but I went back and did another degree because I thought that's
Hmm.
what I needed. So a lot of people will come and say, must I go and do another master's, or is there a communications degree that I must be doing for me to pivot into this space? And my answer is no, you don't need that. You actually need to learn on the job. If you can get an entry level job, that is going to be much more valuable to you than a degree in terms of getting into this field, into this
Hmm.
space. Yeah, and I think that's one of the main questions. And then also, obviously, the other question is, we spoke about the seniority. Can I just go in as a senior medical writer because I've been a postdoc for 5 years? Can I just go and be a senior medical writer? And the question again, the answer I mean to that is no. You still need to learn the ropes. You need
Hmm.
to learn
Hmm.
the industry. Industry is totally different from academia. The way it works is business, and so it's corporate, so it
Hmm.
works in differently. Yeah.
And now you mentioned something which is wanting to, or need, or having the reflex of, oh, maybe a degree will help me get a foot in the door. And I agree with you that they much prefer years or months or years of experience, of relevant experience, than whichever degree you can acquire. And that takes me back to your experience of those 8 months being in that organization, seeing what the job is, and then saying, you know what, I can launch myself personally as a freelancer. Uh,
Yeah.
but this can also work in another way, which is you say, okay, I'm gonna aim for 6 months to a year in this associate medical writer position, and
Right.
then I leverage that in getting into a higher level, a better
The
pay
more
position
senior.
in a bigger organization, etc. Is this something that you see? Is this something that you recommend?
Uh, Definitely. I think that's, if anything, I think that is what most people would do. Most people would do that. But for me personally, coming back to my story, for me personally, I feel like having spent so much time in academia, I developed this independent thinking,
Mm-hmm.
and I was at that level where I was almost launching my own research group. And so for me, those were the driving reasons to say, you know what, I actually want to work for myself. I want to work
Mm-hmm.
independently. And I think working for myself also just gives me that space. I mean, once you grow as a writer, you obviously get to places and spaces where you can mentor other writers and that kind of thing. But
Mm-hmm.
for me, that is something I really enjoy, mentorship, and something that really is very close to my heart. And it was going to take me a while again to get to that place.
Mm-hmm.
It was going to be a few years. And I missed that aspect, of interacting with students, of supervising and mentoring students. And so that also was one of the drivers, because as a
Mm-hmm.
freelancer, if I'm working freelance, I pretty much have control, a lot
Mm-hmm.
more control over my time. And so I guess for me, it boiled down a lot to being able to control my time and what projects I work on and what else I can do with my time
Mm-hmm.
besides the medical writing. Yeah.
Yes, and that's important for a lot of people, this
Yeah.
independence. And
Yeah.
now a follow-up question to that comment is, so if someone says, okay, oh, I kind of like Rebecca's journey. I find it interesting, and I maybe I want to follow the same. I think spending some time in an organization is good for you,
It's
but
good for
it's good for you because you learn the way things work and the way clients need the work done,
absolutely.
etc.
Mm,
But
absolutely.
now my question for you is, how is it? How is the reality of being a freelancer in the medical writing space in terms of the types of projects and the types of clients that you can get? So, what can people expect to be working on and to be writing uh,
Mm.
once they put themselves out there and offer their services as a medical writer? Because I think a lot of people, and I've just met a few students this week, they've heard the term, but they really don't know what
Yeah.
medical writing
They don't
is.
know what it means.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, no, definitely. I guess coming back to your point where you said the experience in a company, in an environment matters. So even though I stayed for 8 months, I feel like I learned a lot during those 6 months, especially because I was coming from a whole different industry. So I think if it's possible at all, I think that experience is valuable if you can get it. But having said that, I've met a lot of people who started off and they never worked for a company. They just started off as freelancers the whole way, and they've been quite successful at it. So if you're willing to put in the work, I think you can still make it, whichever route you choose, whether you decide to start off in corporate or whether you just decide to start off freelance. But having said that, the reality of working as a freelancer is that it's not going to be just money money rolling into your bank. It takes a while before you actually still before you actually establish yourself. I think it's a journey. I've said that I spent most of it took me at least 3 months actually to actually get my first client, because there's a lot of groundwork that
Hmm.
goes in behind the scenes. I mean, I was talking to friends and I was like, this reminds me of building a house, because when you build a house, you start from the foundation and you don't see anything, nothing happens.
Mm-mm.
Doesn't look like anything is happening. You're working so hard, you're putting in the hours, but you don't really see the results. But that is important, behind the scenes kind of work. All of the networking, setting up your LinkedIn profile to make sure that it's optimized, getting a website going, setting up a website, networking, all of that behind the scenes kind of work, I think is it's something that people don't see. And
Hmm.
that is the reality of freelancing and the marketing as well. The rainmaking, they call it the rainmaking. That is
Hmm.
something, if you're a freelancer, you're gonna have to do all of that for yourself.
Yeah.
So my advice is to anybody who wants to go into freelancing is just to make sure, just realize that, you know what, there's a lot of work that goes on behind uh, running a freelance business. I mean, the writing is the easy part. The writing is easy because you know how to do that. You're a technical expert, so you know how to do that. But it's all of that work behind the scenes,
Hmm.
actually building a business that is critical. I mean, I at one point you will laugh at this, but at one point I actually said, "Oh, maybe I need to go and do an MBA."
I've played with the idea too, but now it's well, it's like in a drawer, and I
Yeah,
don't think I'm gonna be doing that. But I think all of us, a lot of us do that again for with the same idea of maybe this degree will make me a good entrepreneur or whatever.
exactly. But you don't need it really. You need to learn what you need to learn to do the job, but you don't really need more degrees.
Hmm.
That's what I think.
I'm just going to share a comment from the audience. Senzeni Nkube, who says, great conversation, especially regarding feeling stuck after so many years of PhD research. Senzeni also asks, medical, a feasible path. Medical writing seems to be a feasible path from academia. What other paths can social science people follow? Senzeni, today we are talking about medical writing. I recommend you to go and to go to the Papa PhD podcast to find it on your app, and there's a bunch of episodes there of people with philosophy PhDs, with psychology PhDs, and their journeys. If you're watching and if you want to see other journeys than medical writing, please go visit the past episodes of the show, or even here on the YouTube channel or on LinkedIn. You can find past conversations with graduates from the humanities. I'm thinking of Katina Rogers. I'm thinking of Aaron Kagan, Ashley Ruba. Those are three that are top of mind. But yeah. Today we are talking just about medical writing, though.
Medical
Um,
writing.
Rebecca, and of course, so there's the behind the scenes of setting yourself up as a freelancer. What about the actual the type of jobs? Because in medical writing, in companies, there's people who are like I was in a kind of medcoms company. There are people who are in CROs and are working in the regulatory space. There are people who actually end up becoming working in patents, etc. In your experience, what different types of work of writing are clients asking you to do? Is it more, in my case, it was Salesforce training type materials. I've also now I'm actually working more on patient related projects. But
Right.
what do you see the market wanting of medical writers today?
So, that's an interesting question, um, and I'll go back to I mentioned earlier how medical writing seems to be obscure,
Mhm.
and what that implies sometimes is that it implies that it's a very small field. It's like, oh, just a very small thing. But actually, once you are inside, you realize just how vast and how broad this field is. I mean, there's so many subspecialties and specialties that one can take or can take on, right? And it's not possible, I think, for anyone to to
Mm,
be a specialist in
do
all
them
of
all.
those. So, in terms of where the market is, I feel like there seems to be a lot of demand for marketing kind of content.
Okay.
But yeah, that's what I see at the moment. It seems to be that's something that I see a lot on. I think that's also a lot of is to do with this digital age that we are in, like digital marketing. But I'll go back. I will take a step back and say that in terms of what you see and what you get yourself into, before I get into what I actually do, is part of that homework, and that is that background work that I spoke about earlier. One of the things that if you want to set yourself up as a freelancer is to actually do a reflection exercise of figuring out what it is that you actually enjoy working on. And many times you might not know right away. Sometimes it might actually take a few trials, working on a few different projects before you realize, no, I actually don't enjoy writing blogs, or I don't enjoy writing, I don't know, regulatory kind of content, you
Hmm.
name it, you name it. So oftentimes you might actually have to try out before you decide what to specialize in. So if you're setting up as a freelancer, the easiest way, and it took me a while to figure this out myself, it took me a few months. The easiest way is to actually decide on a specialty, and
Okay.
then find, or I don't know, get samples or whatever, make samples that speak to the specialty that you want to. And that also becomes your marketing, your branding, on LinkedIn or wherever you decide to market yourself. It becomes a lot easier for you to be visible if you are specializing in something. They always say that it's better to be a big fish in a small pond than
Hmm.
to be
Hmm.
a small fish in a big pond. You're doing anything and everything, and so is everyone else. So it becomes very difficult for you to be noticed. So
Hmm.
one of the easiest ways is to actually find a specialty. And it took me a few months before I decided to zero in and decide, actually, I enjoy the education part.
Okay.
I enjoy the bigger, longer projects. I enjoy grant writing. So I'm going to try and focus on that. I enjoy producing educational material. So I'm going to focus on that. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to do anything else, but that kind of becomes like my branding, my messaging, something that I'm known in my expert and I'm building my expertise in, which is very similar to academia. I mean, you're going to be a PhD, you are a PhD in clinical immunology. You are not a PhD of any
Hmm.
in every medical condition,
Of
you
course.
specialize. Yes. So if you think about it that way, for anyone who is listening and wanting to go into the field of medical writing, the way academia works in terms of specializing, that also is very similar. It's mirrored very closely in
Hmm.
medical writing. Yeah.
Excellent. Rebecca, the time is flying. It's pretty amazing how it's now been almost 50 minutes that we've been talking. I didn't see the time go by.
I did see that
Uh,
too.
but so I do want to. I have a kind of a last question I want to ask you. But before that, I'd want people to know and learn where they can find you if they want to learn a little bit more about your story. Um, and get in touch with you. W- where are the best places to find you, to send you a message, and to
Mm.
get in touch with you?
Yeah, I hang out mainly on LinkedIn. So most of the times you'll find me on LinkedIn. I have a bit of a presence on Twitter and Instagram, but LinkedIn is my main space really. And
Okay.
I put in a lot of effort and energy into building a presence and putting out resources for people who want to make a transition as well on LinkedIn.
So on LinkedIn you can find her as Rebecca Tadokera, medical writer, and then you also have a website. What
Yes,
will
I
people
also.
find there?
Oh, so that's scihealth.com. So that is my website, basically. That is more to learn more about my business, really, about what I do, and the courses that I offer, the training. So I also offer. I'll send you links to this. Maybe you can put that in the show notes.
Of
In the
course.
the coaching that I do. So I also offer one-on-one coaching, or sometimes it's group coaching, a 4-week program where basically I'm trying to help people to actually get actionable, do practical things in terms of just getting your CV right, getting your LinkedIn right, positioning yourself to be able to get into some of these medical, whether it's medical writing. Not everybody wants to be a medical writer, but some people do want to go still into industry. So
Mhm.
I offer training that helps people to do that instead of going for another degree or spending 10 years Googling the internet to find information.
Exactly.
That's the kind of, yeah, so that's the kind of information that you'd be able to find. And
Excellent.
yeah, and yeah.
So do go see Rebecca's content. I will put it all in the show notes, all the links that you will share with me and that you those that you have already shared with me. And now, so to kind of end on a practical note, we've been
Yeah,
talking about the way things work, the way things worked for you, the kind of take home picture that I'm getting of what an ideal path is find an opportunity to learn the
yep,
ropes. Then if you and it seems that with you already were writing, you already you went for that uh, health policy public health degree, so I imagine you already had some samples that you could use, or at least you had writing experience that you could that you could talk about in those first interviews and conversations.
yep,
But blogging, etc., all of those things that you can start doing right away and that you can
right.
use as kind of a portfolio, they will help you a lot
There we
i-
are.
in those conversations. And
Mhm.
then specialization, it's kind of the third thing is find a niche that you like and become a go-to person in that niche. Of course it takes
Correct.
time. That's also something you said, and it's very true. uh,
Mhm.
Putting yourself out there, especially freelance, takes time. It's a long-winded exercise.
Yeah,
but
yeah,
um but if you do it consistently, and if you um if you keep having conversations, if you do networking, it's something that you can do. And of course writing needs to be something that you have some pleasure doing too, or or it's going to be
yep.
difficult.
You have
So
to enjoy it.
so this is kind of the ideal and kind of a short summing up of what you shared today. But we didn't talk about caveats about what not to do, and I'm sure you've seen people do errors in trying to get into the medical writing space. So can we finish on two or three examples of things that you've seen people do wrong and that actually is not helping them or even is hindering them in trying to become a medical writer?
I've seen plenty of those, plenty. So I guess one that jumps right at me right away is medical writing. We spoke about it being is very controlled, and accuracy is a big deal. And every week I get an email from somebody who says, oh, I'm looking for a job, and I look at the email and it's full of typos, it's not been
Hmm.
proofread, that kind of thing. And immediately I'm like, no way, there's no way. There's no way I'm going to hire you with that, So I think if you are going to be wanting to go into medical writing, one of the most important things is just, I mean, no one is perfect. We all will make errors, but check if you're going to send, be it an email, being a writing test, or even your content that you put out on LinkedIn, because it all somehow gets vetted. It gets
Hmm.
looked at. So if you're
Attention to
wanting to look
detail,
in,
yeah, I remember
yeah,
it was super
exactly.
important. Yeah.
So yes, so it's important to just make sure that you are putting yourself out there in the best possible light, so that if a potential recruiter or employer looks at your profile, they are not going to see like all of these glaring typos that show that you are you're sloppy. So that, I think, is a really big mistake, and people don't realize that. And I mean, even when you're interviewing, if you have to submit a written test for a medical writing role, even the actual email that you submit, if you don't proofread, no matter how perfectly done your writing assessment is, you are just not going to get the role. Your
Hmm.
CV is part of the application process. So all of those little things, and people, I think a lot of times people miss that, and they'll tell you, oh, I've applied to so many roles, I didn't get it. And they will not tell you that your CV was full of typos.
Of course.
Yeah, so those are the key things I would urge people to watch out for, especially if they're looking for entry level roles.
Hmm. Very good. And to finish, maybe on a so this is really good advice. Be very, very attentive to detail. And to finish, maybe on a positive note, what is one piece of advice that you can share, um, of a great thing to do that kind of can make you stand out as a candidate?
Mm. A great thing to do. In terms of the actual interview, I think what I would advise candidates, if you are interviewing, if you manage, there's a series, obviously, there's a number of hoops to jump. But if you happen to get a chance to get to that actual interview,
Hmm.
ask questions, be interested, be engaged. I think that makes you stand out automatically because it shows that you are actually engaged and you know, and read about the role as well. Read about the role so that you have relevant questions to ask. And maybe one other thing that I would add for a lot of people, which is coming full circle with doing the degree. For most of these people, my advice to them is you already have enough. You've got enough in terms of what you need. And the beauty of medical writing is I think the entry barrier is lower than for a lot of other, say, for example, to become, I can't just hope and go be an engineer or something like that.
Mm-mm.
I think the entry barrier is relatively low, it's doable. And most people, if you have a bachelor's or a master's or a PhD, you already have what is required. You have enough. So, yeah, you have what it takes. That's often what I'll tell people.
I love that, and it's a great way to end this interview. You have what it takes, and this message is I try to convey it to graduates all the time, and often we are very critical of ourselves, and we
Yeah.
don't believe we have what it takes, and we
Mm,
believe, like you said, that leaving academia is tantamount to failure, and it's not. It's just the
yeah.
natural way of things, and it's 60, 70, 80% of people will have to find a place outside academia. You've studied enough, and if you have a will to learn, and if you show this passion for this domain you're getting into, and what you said about showing interest and asking questions, I think it's key to any job interview.
Mm, yeah.
People need to feel that, okay, this person is going to enjoy working in my organization, is going to
Yeah.
be a great addition to the team, and actually has done their homework, and all of that counts in any
Yeah.
domain, but of course
Mm,
also in this domain of medical writing.
right.
Were you going to say something? I
No,
felt you were
no.
going to react. So
No, I'm
the
just
other,
agreeing. I'm
agreeing.
agreeing
Okay.
100%, 100% with what you say.
So, and the trick to show that you've done your homework, the first part of the trick is uh, talk to Rebecca. Talk to people who already are on platforms sharing about what the reality of the job is. But not only Rebecca, but she's here
Many
today.
others.
She's
Yeah.
so nice. Rebecca, I know you're friends with Vicky. And there's a lot of us out there who have
Yeah.
done this transition and who are ready to talk to you about what the reality of the job that we're doing is.
Mm,
And
yeah.
find a medical writer maybe who came from the same graduate school as you. Connect with them on LinkedIn and say, hey, I'm finishing my degree. I like your journey. Can you talk to me a little bit about what your day to day is? And that'll make you so much better
Yeah.
at the interview than if you go in just having read a job posting. So that's
Mm,
great advice, Rebecca, and
right.
I'm thankful
Right.
that you mentioned it, and I think it's a great way to finish this
Yeah.
interview.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. People don't realize that actually getting people to talk about themselves is one of the people's favorite topics is talking about themselves, right?
It's true.
So it's not that hard. It's not that hard to get somebody to speak to you about their journey, you know.
It is. It's true. And if people like, I always say this, and I don't get tired of saying it because I think it's important. We are often like shy a little bit and timid about reaching out to people. Just think about it this way: if someone is on a social platform, and LinkedIn is a social media, is a social platform,
Yeah.
it's a community,
Mm,
it's because they're open to being reached out to. So don't be shy.
exactly.
And if they're busy, they'll tell you I'm busy, or they won't
Mm,
answer because they're busy. Don't never take it personally.
Don't
but
take it personal.
yeah, but make use of the of years. A few years ago, I was talking. Who was I talking to? And they said, because 20 years ago I had to phone all these people. Today I just need to go on LinkedIn and I can reach them and say hi.
So
And
much easier.
it is so much easier.
So much easier. Even if you're an introvert, it has become so much easier to
It's
network
true.
at the
It is true.
moment. Yeah.
Rebecca, this has been a great conversation. I think people who are interested in medical writing there's a lot of nuggets in what you said that they can take home and think about and help and use to help prepare themselves to have these first conversations in the space and to get a foot in the door. So I want to thank you for having been here with me, and I'm super grateful that we connected. And
Yeah.
I commend what you're doing in terms of helping people navigate this kind of
The crisis.
foggy foggy
Fuck
sea
you. That's a
of
nice way of
of
putting
of
it.
the
Yeah.
of transitioning from academia. And yeah, it's always a pleasure to have someone with your energy and with a mission like yours here on the show. So thank you for having me
Thank
here.
you. Thank you for having me, David. It was lovely chatting to you. And I hope your listeners benefited, got one or two nuggets that can help them transition. Yeah.
I'm sure
Chat.
they have. I just
Great.
yeah, go ahead, you were going to say something.
Yeah, no, I was saying it was lovely chatting to you, and maybe we would do it again sometime.
Hmm.
So, thank you, thank you.
Sure. And so for you who were watching, and we have a last comment. Sylvie is saying thank you. Uh, Thank you, Sylvie, for watching. To all of you who were watching live or are watching now, thank you for being here with us. Send us your questions, send us your comments. We always love to hear from you. And like we were just saying, we both have this mission of helping, and
Yeah,
questions and doubts that you send kind of are ways for us to be able to fulfill that mission. So don't hesitate to write, don't
don't
hesitate to
hesitate.
comment.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're here to help.
Exactly. And for Beyond the Thesis with Papa PhD, the channel, the YouTube channel, if you like this, what you heard, if you like this type of content, subscribe, get me to 500, and help me be able to kind of improve the way I can interact with you and do things on the platform. And I'll of course follow the podcast. If you look for Papa PhD or for Beyond the Thesis, you will find it on whichever platform you prefer. And I'll keep on publishing episodes weekly, and that's it. If you do, the only other thing that you can do that I really appreciate is if you know someone that is maybe not listening to podcasts, show them a podcast that you love. If it's Papa PhD, if it's Beyond the Thesis, that's even better. But get people listening to podcasts, and if you have someone that's in grad school and thinking about medical writing, about careers after grad school, talk to them about Papa PhD, and share the podcast. That's one of the things that helps me the most. Same thing. Go and reach out to Rebecca, and she's not so active on Twitter, etc. But maybe eventually she will be. So follow her there too.
Yeah, one day.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of work, social media. So I
It
totally understand.
is. Yeah. Yeah.
So that's it. That's it for the live today. Thank you so much to everyone who was watching. Rebecca, this was great.
Thank you, David.
I'm going to end the live now, but I'm super happy that you had the chance to come and spend this hour with me on the Papa PhD microphone.
Thanks, David, for having me, and thanks for everyone who joined us on the LinkedIn Live.